Hello, and welcome to Book Circle. I'm Earl Wajenberg. This time we're going to continue our reading of Lilith by George MacDonald. We are following the adventures of the narrator, Mr. Vane, as he tries to make sense of his experiences following the house librarian who leads him back and forth between worlds, now in the shape of a man, now in the shape of a raven. In the library was one small window to the east, through which, at this time of year, the first rays of the sun shone upon a mirror, whence they were reflected on the masked door. When I woke, there they shone, and thither they drew my eyes. With the feeling that behind it must lie the boundless chamber I had left by that door, I sprang to my feet and opened it. The light, like an eager hound, shot before me into the closet and pounced upon the gilded edges of a large book. "What idiot," I cried, "has put that book in the shelf the wrong way?" But the gilded edges, reflecting the light a second time, flung it on a nest of drawers in a dark corner, and I saw that one of them was half open. "More meddling," I cried, and went to close the drawer. It contained old papers, and seemed more than full, for it would not close. Taking the topmost one out, I perceived that it was in my father's writing, and of some length. The words on which first my eyes fell at once made me eager to learn what it contained. I carried it to the library, sat down in one of the western windows, and read what follows. Chapter 8. My Father's Manuscript. I am filled with awe of what I have to write. The sun is shining golden above me, the sea lies blue beneath his gaze, the same world sends its growing things up to the sun, and its flying things into the air, which I have breathed from my infancy. But I know the outspread splendor a passing show, and that at any moment it may, like the drop scene of a stage, be lifted to reveal more wonderful things. Shortly after my father's death, I was seated one morning in the library. I had been somewhat listlessly regarding the portrait that hangs among the books, which I knew only as that of a distant ancestor, and wishing I could learn something of its original. Then I had taken a book from the shelves and begun to read. Glancing up from it, I saw coming toward me, not between me and the door, but between me and the portrait, a thin, pale man in rusty black. He looked sharp and eager, and had a notable nose, at once reminding me of a certain jug my sisters used to call Mr. Crow. "Finding myself in your vicinity, Mr. Vane, I have given myself the pleasure of calling," he said in a peculiar but not disagreeable voice. "Your honored grandfather treated me, I may say it without presumption, as a friend, having known me from childhood as his father's librarian." It did not strike me at the time how old the man must be. "May I ask where you live now, Mr. Crow?" I said. He smiled an amused smile. "You nearly hit my name," he rejoined, "which shows the family insight. You have seen me before, but only once, and could not then have heard it." "Where was that?" "In this very room. You were quite a child, however." I could not be sure that I remembered him, but for a moment I fancied I did, and I begged him to set me right as to his name. "There is such a thing as remembering without recognizing the memory in it," he remarked. "For my name, which you have near enough, it used to be Raven." I had heard the name, for marvelous tales had brought it to me. "It is very kind of you to come and see me," I said. "Will you not sit down?" He seated himself at once. "You knew my father, then, I presume?" "I knew him," he answered with a curious smile, "but he did not care about my acquaintance, and we never met. That gentleman, however," he added, pointing to the portrait, "old Sir Uphard, his people called him, was in his day a friend of mine yet more intimate than ever your grandfather became." Then at length I began to think the interview a strange one, but in truth it was hardly stranger than my visitor should remember Sir Upward than that he should have been my great-grandfather's librarian. "I owe him much," he continued, "for although I had read many more books than he, yet through the special direction of his studies he was able to inform me of a certain relation of modes which I should never have discovered of myself, and could hardly have learned from anyone else." "Would you mind telling me all about that?" I said. "By no means, at least as much as I am able. There are not such things as willful secrets," he answered, and went on. That closet held his library, 100 manuscripts or so, for printing was not then invented. One morning I sat there working at a catalogue of them, when he looked in at the door and said, "Come." I laid down my pen and followed him, across the great hall, down a steep rough descent, and along an underground passage to a tower he had lately built, consisting of a stair and a room at the top of it. The door of this room had a tremendous lock, which he undid with the smallest key I ever saw. I had scarcely crossed the threshold after him when, to my eyes, he began to dwindle and grew less and less. All at once my vision seemed to come right, and I saw that he was moving swiftly away from me. In a minute more he was the merest speck in the distance, with the tops of blue mountains beyond him, clear against a sky of paler blue. I recognized the country, for I had gone there and come again many a time, although I had never known this way to it. Many years after, when the tower had long disappeared, I taught one of his descendants what Sir Upward had taught me, and now and then to this day I use your house when I want to go the nearest way home. I must indeed, without your leave, for which I ask your pardon, have by this time well established a right-of-way through it, not from front to back, but from bottom to top. You would have me then understand, Mr. Raven, I said, that you go through my house into another world, heedless of disparting space? That I go through it is an incontrovertible acknowledgment of space, returned the old librarian. Please do not quibble, Mr. Raven, I rejoined. Please take my question as you know I meant it. There is in your house a door, one step through which carries me into a world very much another than this. A better? Not throughout, but so much another that most of its physical and many of its mental laws are different from those of this world. As for moral laws, they must everywhere be fundamentally the same. You try my power of belief, I said. Do you take me for a madman, probably? You do not look like one. A liar, then? You give me no ground to think you such. Only you do not believe me? I will go out of that door with you, if you like. I believe in you enough to attempt the risk. The blunder all my children make, he murmured. The only door out is the door in. I began to think he must be crazy. He sat silent for a moment, his head resting on his hand, his elbow on the table, and his eyes on the books before him. A book, he said, is a door in, and therefore a door out. I see old Sir Upward, he went on, closing his eyes, and my heart swells with love for him. What world is he in? The world of your heart, I replied. That is, the idea of him is there. There is one world, then, at least, of which your hall door does not open? I grant you so much, but the things in that world are not things to have and to hold. Think a little farther, he rejoined. Did anything ever become yours except by getting into that world? The thought is beyond you, however, at present. I tell you, there are more worlds and more doors to them than you will think of in many years. He rose, left the library, crossed the hall, and went straight up to the garret, familiar evidently with every turn. I followed, studying his back. His hair hung down, long and dark, straight and glossy. His coat was wide and reached to his heels. His shoes seemed too large for him. In the garret, a light came through at the edges of the great roofing slabs and showed us parts where there was no flooring, and we must step from joist to joist. In the middle of one of these spaces rose a partition with a door. Through it I followed Mr. Raven into a small, obscure chamber whose top contracted as it rose and went slanting through the roof. That is the door I spoke of, he said, pointing to an oblong mirror that stood on the floor and leaned against the wall. I went in front of it and saw our figures dimly reflected in its dusty face. There was something about it that made me uneasy. It looked old-fashioned and neglected, but notwithstanding its ordinary seeming, the eagle perched with outstretched wings on the top appeared threatful. As a mirror, said the librarian, it has grown dingy with age, but that is no matter. Its dourness depends on the light. Light? I rejoined. There is no light here. He did not answer me, but began to pull at a little chain on the opposite wall. I heard a creaking. The top of the chamber was turning slowly round. He ceased pulling, looked at his watch, and began to pull again. "We arrive almost to the moment," he said. "It is on the very stroke of noon." The top went creaking and revolving for a minute or so. Then he pulled 2 other chains, now this, now that, and returned to the first. A moment more, and the chamber grew much clearer. A patch of sunlight had fallen upon a mirror on the wall opposite that against which the other leaned, and on the dust I saw the path of the reflected rays to the mirror on the ground. But from the latter none were returned. There seemed to go clean through. There was nowhere in the chamber a second patch of light. "Where are the sun rays gone?" I cried. "That I cannot tell," returned Mr. Raven. "Back, perhaps, to where they came from first. They now belong, I fancy, to a sense not yet developed in us." He then talked of the relations of mind to matter and of sense to qualities in a way I could only a little understand, whence he went on to yet stranger things which I could not at all comprehend. He spoke much about dimensions, telling me that there were many more than 3, some of them concerned with powers which were indeed in us, but of which as yet we knew absolutely nothing. His words, however, I confess, took little more hold on me than did the light of the mirror on the mirror, for I thought he hardly knew what he was saying. Suddenly I was aware that our forms had gone from the mirror, which seemed full of a white mist. As I gazed, I saw, growing gradually visible beyond the mist, the tops of a range of mountains, which became clearer and clearer. Soon the mist vanished entirely, uncovering the face of a wide heath, on which at some distance was the figure of a man moving swiftly away. I turned to address my companion. He was no longer by my side. I looked again at the form in the mirror and recognized the wide coat flying, the black hair lifted in a wind that did not touch me. I rushed in terror from the place. Chapter 9. I Repent. I laid the manuscript down, consoled to find that my father had had a peep into that mysterious world, and that he knew Mr. Raven. Then I remembered that I had never heard the cause or any circumstance of my father's death, and began to believe that he must at last have followed Mr. Raven and not come back. Whereupon I speedily grew ashamed of my flight. What wondrous facts might I not by this time have gathered concerning life and death, and wide regions beyond ordinary perception? Assuredly the Ravens were good people, and the night in their house would nowise have hurt me. They were doubtless strange, but it was faculty in which the one was peculiar, and beauty in which the other was marvelous. And I had not believed in them. I had treated them as unworthy of my confidence, as harboring a design against me. The more I thought of my behavior to them, the more disgusted I became with myself. Why should I have feared such dead? To share their holy rest was an honor of which I had proved myself unworthy. What harm could that sleeping king, that lady with the wound in her palm, have done me? I felt a longing after the sweet and stately stillness of their 2 countenances, and wept. Weeping, I threw myself on a couch, and suddenly fell asleep. As suddenly I woke, feeling as if some one had called me. The house was still as an empty church. A blackbird was singing on the lawn. I said to myself, I will go and tell them I am ashamed, and will do whatever they would have me do. I rose and went straight up the stairs to the garret. The wooden chamber was just as when I first saw it, the mirror dimly reflecting everything before it. It was nearly noon, and the sun would be a little higher than when I first came. I must raise the hood a little and adjust the mirrors accordingly. If I had but been in time to see Mr. Raven do it. I pulled the chains and let the light fall on the first mirror. I turned then to the other. There were the shapes of the former vision, distinguishable indeed, but tremulous, like a landscape in a pool ruffled by a small wind. I touched the glass. It was impermeable. Suspecting polarization as the thing required, I shifted and shifted the mirrors, changing their relation, until at last, in a great degree, so far as I was concerned by chance, things came right between them, and I saw the mountains blue and steady and clear. I stepped forward, and my feet were among the heather. All I knew of the way to the cottage was that we had gone through a pine forest. I passed through many thickets and several small fir woods, continually fancying afresh that I recognized something of the country, but I had come upon no forest, and now the sun was near the horizon, and the air had begun to grow chill with the coming winter, when to my delight I saw a little black object coming toward me. It was indeed the raven. I hastened to meet him. "I beg your pardon, sir, for my rudeness last night," I said. "Will you take me with you now? I heartily confess I do not deserve it." "Ah," he returned and looked up. Then, after a brief pause, "My wife does not expect you tonight," he said. "She regrets that we had all encouraged your staying last week." "Take me to her, that I may tell her how sorry I am," I begged humbly. "It is of no use," he answered. "Your night was not come then, or you would not have left us. It is not come now, and I cannot show you the way. The dead were rejoicing under their daisies. They all lie among the roots of the flowers of heaven, at the thought of your delight when the winter should be past, and the morning with its birds come. Ere you left them, they shivered in their beds. When the spring of the universe arrives, but that cannot be for ages yet, how many I do not know, and do not care to know. Tell me one thing, I beg of you, Mr. Raven. Is my father with you? Have you seen him since he left the world?" "Yes, he is with us, fast asleep. That was he you saw with his arm on the coverlet, his hand half closed." "Why did you not tell me, that I should have been so near him and not know?" "And turn your back on him," corrected the raven. "I would have lain down at once had I known." "I doubt it. Had you been ready to lie down, you would have known him. Old Sir Upward," he went on, "and your twice-great-grandfather, both are up and away long ago. Your great-grandfather has been with us for many a year. I think he will soon begin to stir. You saw him last night, though of course you did not know him." "Why of course?" "Because he is so much nearer waking than you. No one who will not sleep can ever wake." "I do not understand you at all." "You turned away and would not understand." I held my peace, but if I did not say something, he would go. "And my grandfather? Is he also with you?" I asked. "No, he is still in the evil wood fighting the dead." "Where is the evil wood, that I may find him?" "You will not find him, but you will hardly miss the wood. It is the place where those who will not sleep wake up at night to kill their dead and bury them." "I cannot understand you." "Naturally not. Neither do I understand you. I can read neither your heart nor your face. When my wife and I do not understand our children, it is because there is not enough of them to be understood. God alone can understand foolishness." "Then," I said, feeling naked and very worthless, "will you be so good as to show me the nearest way home? There are more ways than one, I know, for I have gone by 2 already." "There are indeed many ways." "Tell me, please, how to recognize the nearest." "I cannot," answered the raven. "You and I use the same words with different meanings. We are often unable to tell people what they need to know because they want to know something else, and would therefore only misunderstand what we said. Home is ever so far away in the palm of your hand, and how to get there it is of no use to tell you. But you will get there. You must get there. You have to get there. Everybody who is not at home has to go home. You thought you were at home where I found you. If that had been your home, you could not have left it. Nobody can leave home, and nobody ever was or ever will be at home without having gone there." "Enigma treading on enigma," I exclaimed. "I did not come here to be asked riddles." "No, but you came and found the riddles waiting for you. Indeed, you are yourself the only riddle. What you call riddles are truths, and seem riddles because you are not true." "Worse and worse!" I cried. "And you must answer the riddles," he continued. "They will go on asking themselves until you understand yourself. The universe is a riddle trying to get out, and you are holding your door hard against it." "Will you not in pity tell me what I am to do, where I must go?" "How should I tell your to-do, or the way to it?" "If I am not to go home, at least direct me to some of my kind." "I do not know of any. The beings most like you are in that direction." He pointed with his beak. I could see nothing but the setting sun, which blinded me. "Well," I said bitterly, "I cannot help feeling hardly treated, taken from my home, abandoned in a strange world, and refused instruction as to where I am to go or what I am to do." "You forget," said the raven, "that when I brought you and you declined my hospitality, you reached what you call home in safety. Now you are come of yourself. Good night." He turned and walked slowly away, with his beak toward the ground. I stood dazed. It was true I had come of myself, but had I not come with intent of atonement? My heart was sore, and in my brain was neither quest nor purpose, hope nor desire. I gazed after the raven, and would have followed him, but it felt useless. All at once he pounced on a spot, throwing the whole weight of his body on his bill, and for some moments dug vigorously. Then, with a flutter of his wings, he threw back his head, and something shot from his bill, cast high in the air. That moment the sun set, and the air at once grew very dusk. But the something opened into a soft radiance, and came pulsing toward me like a firefly, but with a much larger and a yellower light. It flew over my head. I turned and followed it. And we will continue Mr. Vane's adventures the next time. Thank you.